Hey everyone, Evo here. In this video, we're going to learn to play Pokemon Deckbuilding Game. In the Pokemon Deckbuilding Game, players take on the role of one of 8 iconic characters from the Pokemon universe in hopes of becoming a Pokemon Master. While players start their adventure with some basic starter cards, they will add new and more powerful cards as the game progresses. In the end, the player with the most XP will be declared the very best, like no one ever was. Before jumping into the action, let's quickly go over the makeup of a card. On the top line, we have the card's name. A little further down, typically under the art, we have the type line. This will list a card's type, such as starter, item, Pokemon, TM/HM, or others. Some cards may have multiple types, such as this starter Pokemon, while others may have no type, like this poison card. Additionally, the type line will contain the set code. This just denotes which game this specific card came from. Under the type line, we have the text box. This will state the card's game text, which is essentially what the card does. If we take a look at Ash's Pikachu, for example, when we play this card, we will gain 1 energy, and then we will draw a card. A card's text is always resolved from top to bottom. In the lower left corner, we will see the XP value. Remember, at the end of the game, the player with the highest total XP across all of their cards is the winner. In the lower right corner, we have a card's cost. This is usually displayed as an amount of energy symbols, but may sometimes be written out for larger values. If there is no symbol or value listed, the card's cost is 0. A card's cost is paid for by energy. Energy is the currency of the game, and can be spent to buy cards or perform actions such as evolving Pokemon. Before we jump into gameplay, let's take a glance at the different zones on the table. To start with, we have the main deck. This is where we will find the majority of cards that will be added to our deck throughout the game. To the right of the main deck, we have the route, which is made up of 5 card slots. Cards are placed from the main deck into each route slot, face up. These cards can later be bought or gained by players. The evolution stack contains all of the evolved Pokemon cards. This stack is face up in public. We'll go over how to evolve your Pokemon later on in this video. The potion stack contains potion cards, which includes 4 of these cards per player. Players may buy as many of these as they wish during their turn, provided they can afford their cost. Next up, we have the challenge stack. Challenge cards provide huge amounts of XP to the player that buys them. Only the top card of the challenge stack is face up though, while the rest of the stack is face down. Typically, only face up cards may be bought or gained. Continuing down the line, we have the poison stack, made up of 5 poison cards per player. These can't be bought, but some card effects will give these out to players during the game. Notice that they provide -1 XP and don't do anything when played, so we want to keep these out of our deck as much as possible. At the end of the line, we have the destroyed pile. Place any cards that are destroyed throughout the game here. Lastly, each player has their own deck, trainer, and discard pile zones. Some further generations of the game will make use of the mythical Pokemon stack and these other zones above. We can ignore those for now. Pokemon Deckbuilding Game is played over a series of turns, starting with the first player and going clockwise around the table. Each player's turn is made up of 3 phases. In order, those phases are the start phase, the main phase, and the end phase. The start phase is where effects that trigger at the start of a player's turn take effect. It is also where counterattacks that enter the route during the previous end phase will resolve. Moving on, the main phase is where most of the action actually happens. This is the time when the turn player can play a card, activate any during your turn or once per turn effects, use any other effect that does not have a phase or turn restriction, or buy a card. The turn player can take these actions in any order, and as many times as they wish and are able to do so. For instance, during our main phase, we could play 3 tackle cards. We could buy a card from the route that cost 3 or less. Then we could play this potion card to gain 2 energy, and then buy this bicycle as it costs 2. Players may buy any number of cards in the route, any number of potions from the potion stack, and the face-up card of the challenge stack, provided they have the energy to do so. Unless something states otherwise, anytime a player buys or gains a card, it immediately goes to their discard pile. Once we have taken all the actions we wish to perform, we'll proceed to our end phase. The end phase goes through a list of actions that happen automatically. We start by placing any cards in our hand into our discard pile. If we have any effects that trigger at the end of your turn, they would do so now. Following that, we discard all cards we control and play, except for those that have the ongoing keyword, or that were specifically put in front of our trainer, such as the Slowpoke. If we have any leftover energy, that is now lost. If there are any empty slots in the route, we flip over the top card of the main deck into each empty slot. Remember though, any encounter cards that are flipped up here do not resolve until the next player's start phase. We then check the challenge stack. If the top card is face down, we flip that top card face up. Lastly, we draw a new hand of 5 cards, and then the next player's turn begins. If at any point we attempt to draw, discard, reveal, or put the top card of our deck into our hand, and our deck is empty, we must shuffle our discard pile into our deck. Do take note though, that an effect that states to look at cards on top of your deck does not cause an empty deck to reshuffle. Also, if during a player's end phase, if the challenge stack is empty, or if there are not enough cards in the main deck to completely refill the route, the game immediately ends. Players gather all of the cards and total all of the XP. The player with the highest total is declared the winner. So now that we know the basics, let's go over a few keywords and scenarios we may come across. Let's start with the evolve keyword. Some Pokemon may say evolve followed by a number within their text box. You'll notice that both the word evolve and the number are bolded, followed by a colon. This formatting denotes that it is a keyword. The evolve keyword means, once during this turn, while this card is in play, you may pay the amount of energy listed. If you do, get this effect. So for example, this Charmander here, when we play him, we would gain 1 energy, and then at any point during our main phase this turn, we can pay 4 energy. If we do, we put this Charmander under our trainer, then we gain Charmeleon from the evolution stack. Some cards give you an option as part of their evolve effect. Looking at EV here, when we evolve, we have the choice of gaining either Flareon, or Jolteon, or Vaporeon. If one of those options no longer exists in the evolution stack though, we must choose one of the others that are available. Evolving Pokemon is a large aspect of the Pokemon Deckbuilding game. It allows us to directly turn our weaker cards into more powerful cards. And as those weaker cards get placed under our trainer when they evolve, they still count towards our XP total at the end of the game. Let's now explore what really drives the interaction in Pokemon Deckbuilding Game: attack cards. Some cards may have this attack keyword listed in their text box. When you play a card with an attack, you must resolve that attack. As we learned earlier, you resolve card text from top to bottom. You can't choose to ignore part of a card's text. You'll also notice that some attacks affect each opponent, while others will have us choose an opponent and have that attack affect only them. When an attack keyword is being resolved, what is called an attack window is opened. Beginning with the turn player and going clockwise around the table, each player that is being targeted by the attack has a chance to defend the attack. This is accomplished by cards with the defense keyword. The defense keyword literally means when you are attacked, you may perform this action, and typically involves avoiding that attack. Let's take a look at this write-on. It states +2 energy, defense. You may discard this to avoid an attack. If you do, draw 2 cards. When we are in an attack window and are being attacked, we have the option to activate this defense keyword. We can do that by discarding write-on from our hand to allow us to avoid the effects of that attack. Additionally, write-on states that if we do this, we can also draw 2 cards. Note that we will not gain the +2 energy. That is listed above and outside of the defense keyword. Defending an attack is optional. We do not have to use a defense during an attack window if we do not want to, even if we have a defense card in our hand. If we don't avoid an attack though that is targeting us, we have to do whatever that attack keyword says, which is usually bad for us. The last keyword we will cover today has to do with encounters. Encounter cards are a card type that can be found within the main deck. They represent battles, ploys by villainous teams, other harmful or even sometimes helpful effects. Some of those encounters have an encounter attack keyword. The encounter attack keyword means when this enters the route, attack ... It follows the same attack window mechanics as the attack keyword we just learned about. Players that are being affected by the encounter attack may use defense cards to avoid them. As we learned previously though, if an encounter attack is added to the route during an end phase, it triggers during the next player's start phase. As we wrap things up, let's go over a few other quick points for players who may be new to the genre. Any decks or stacks of cards that are face down are considered hidden knowledge. Players may not look through these unless something specifically states otherwise. A player's hand is also considered hidden to their opponents at the table. Any face-up deck or stack of cards is public information and may be freely searched at any time. Cards that are placed under a trainer are done so face-up and are therefore also public knowledge. When you buy a card, you gain that card. When you gain a card, it is immediately placed into your discard pile unless otherwise stated. A player controls their trainer, each card they put into play, each card they put in front of their trainer, and each card on top of their trainer. Unless otherwise specified, text that refers to control of a card is referring to control of a card in play. A card in any zone is owned by the player in whose deck it started the game in, or the player who gained that card during the game. If a card is put into a player's deck, discard pile, hand, on top of trainer, or under trainer, it is put into its owner's instance of that zone unless something states otherwise. If the text of a card specifically contradicts the rules of the game, that card takes precedence. If an effect says that something can't happen, and another effect or rule tries to make that same thing happen, the can't effect takes priority. And lastly, any text or rule that doesn't state that you may do something is mandatory and must be performed as much as possible. Text that does say you may do something can be declined. When text says up to a specific number, any number between and including 0 and that number may be chosen. And with that, now we know how to play Pokemon Deckbuilding Game. Check out our next video to see all the tips and tricks on using Tabletop Simulator, as well as learn to master the automation and tools built into the mod itself. Thanks for watching.